The economic mess, of course, is the biggest headline and the biggest headache in America, and we'd like to get some answers, and so we've asked Closing Bells, Maria Bartiromo, to be with us. Welcome back again on our Hot Topics. Okay. So, every day there's another plan. Now, this morning, Treasury Secretary Geithner laid out the bank rescue plan, which says that private funds are going to pay for toxic assets. First of all, exactly what's a toxic asset, which I can barely pronounce?
Toxic assets are securities, assets that the banks hold on their balance sheet. They call them toxic because nobody wants them. There's no market for them anymore, Barbara. So, in other words, let's say during the boom years, you had investment bank XYZ, whatever, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and they turned mortgages that people bought, right? People took out mortgages, subprime, jumbo, all sorts of mortgages, and they packaged them as a security. So it's not a stock. I'm sorry? It has a particular name. That's right. You could do credit default swaps is the name that you're talking about. But, you know, it all gets real complicated when you put in these sophisticated... The bottom line is these are assets that the banks hold, and they can't get rid of them.
So now the government's going to buy them?
Because people have defaulted on them.
Yes, people have defaulted on them.
Maria, the government's not going to buy them?
The government is putting a plan in place where the government will invest in those assets along with private investors in the hopes that at some point when we get out of this, with hopes that those assets are actually going to be marked up and they are going to be increasing in value. Right now, they've decreased in value. Nobody wants them, and they're just sitting on the bank's books, and that's why every quarter the banks have to come down, they write them down, and they take losses on them because they can't.
I still don't understand it.
But I don't understand.
If I'm just a regular person sitting at home, this whole plan with the toxic assets and the private investors, how does this affect me?
That's really the question that is the question of the day. And it impacts you because you will, as a consumer, as a business, a small business, be able to borrow. And credit will start moving in the system again. Because the fact is because these assets are sitting on the bank's books, they have been unable to sell them and get them off their books, so they are not lending enough.
But didn't we already give them a lot of money to do that exact thing?
That's right. But
why didn't they release that money so people can buy houses?
While we gave them the money, the other thing that we did was tell them you need to get your capital levels up. So the banks are facing two issues. Number one, okay, I need to lend more.
Number two, be lending to people who actually can afford the loans.
No, they're getting much more conservative in terms of who they're lending money to.
It's private people. You mean some rich person can buy a toxic
private equity firms, hedge funds, pension funds, large investors, individual investors can team up and put their money side by side with the government.
We keep hearing that the more the more money the government spends, more and more, eventually this is going to be more taxes for us.
Well, look, the money's got to come from somewhere, and there's no doubt about it that we have spent a lot of money on this rescue plan. When you look at all of the plans out, you've got a mortgage modification plan, you've got the bank plan, putting more money into the banks, and at some point, revenue has to come from somewhere in order to pay back our debt as a country. So I suspect we will see higher taxes.
What about with housing in terms of mortgages, with rates coming down? Is this a time for people to consider refinancing? Is that what's being advised?
Refinancing right now is booming because people realize that you are talking about very, very low interest rates.
How low is low?
Well, I mean, you're talking about, having dropped in the mortgage rates 5%. I mean, it's gone up. This is probably the best of the best right now. So I would say you don't want to be...
Maybe it should go lower to 3%.
You know what? I would not be betting that rates are going to go substantially lower from here because I think right now you've got a fantastic environment and you don't want to approach buying a home like a flipper, you're just in it for the short term. If you find a home that you love, you're going to be putting your time, your energy, your love into that home.
Or you're in a home that you love.
And you want to either stay there or if you want to sell it, but you don't want to do it and try to time it.
The way they have in the past where they're buying on spec.
Exactly. You don't want to be doing that.
Now, okay, so today everything is going on. Is there any safe investment that we can make?
Yes, look, I think that, Barbara made an important point during the commercial break, and that is it really does depend on your age, because the younger you are, the more time you have and the more risk you can take on. And you should be invested in stocks. Over the long term, I do believe that the stock market will represent the best returns for an investor, because you're not getting much of a return when you look at treasuries.
In the Great Depression, how long?
But if you're older and you need the money sooner,
don't give you much of a yield. But they're saying, but also,
at least
if
you
don't have money to lose, should you be putting it in the stock market?
Look, I believe that you want to have some exposure to the stock market. But again, it depends on your age. If you need this money next year, then you know what? maybe you need to be keeping it in cash or keeping it in treasuries.
There are stocks that are $2 a share now. They used to be $40.
But
buy those.
It doesn't really matter if it's $2 because it might be going to $1. It really what's more important than necessarily the actual price of the stock is how much that company is going to earn. You know, what are we talking about in terms of a real business? Is it going to be earning money? Who are the competitors? Where's the market? Are people going to be buying its product?
What happened to blue chip stocks? Remember those?
Yeah.
What happened to those?
There are many blue chips. And you know what? Today, people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater and thinking that everything is bad. It's just not true. We will get through this. We're a resilient country, and we will get through this.
What about, you know, a lot of people are obviously looking to experts in the field to tell them what to do, how to help us. Last week we saw your colleague Jim Cramer get into it with Jon Stewart. And, you know, I think a question out there is how much are those experts who are out there, voices in this field, responsible for people getting into maybe bad stocks and trades?
Like you're saying, get involved in stocks.
Look, I said that for a long-term investment portfolio, I think that it's important to have some exposure to stocks. I think you have to put a lot of things, in there, like how old are you, what is the risk you can take on, when do you need the money.
What about risk in terms of someone in your position or
question? I think that we all need to take responsibility for what we're doing. I mean, the media bears responsibility, the lenders, the regulators who were asleep at the wheel, the people who said, oh, sure, you don't have to give me any evidence and you can have this, $1 million home and this $1 million mortgage. So I think we all have to face responsibility.
Do you think we'll see less of that advice coming through, or do you think there's going to be...
I think people are smarter than ever, and I think people recognize that at the end of the day, the onus is on you to make sure that you understand where you're putting your money and you feel comfortable with it. You don't just, jump off a bridge because someone says do it.
Do you think people should stop contributing, as some are now, to their 401ks because they're nervous?
Absolutely not. I think the 401k is critical in terms of retirement and you needing money when you do retire. I believe savings, real quick, 3 buckets. First bucket, very simple savings account, a CD or a savings account. You're not going to get a great yield, but life throws you a curveball. The money's there if you need it. Number 2, retirement. 401k. If you have access to a 401k, a must. If you don't, take out an IRA, individual retirement account. Third bucket, I believe, has to have some stock market exposure. That means over the long term, you want to be diversified. I would not be a stock picker if you don't know what you're doing, but there are ways to get broad, diversified exposure to the market.
How's the market today?
The market is up. People are very encouraged about the Geithner plan.
All we keep hearing about is maybe it's the Geithner plan, is how terrible things are, and yet the market goes up.
Well, the market's still down, 10% year to date, and we had a 40% decline last year. So I think the market has definitely reflected it's a tough time in the economy.
Do you have faith in Geithner?
I think Geithner right now has a situation where it's a show-me situation. I think he needs to prove to the market and to investors that he's got his arms around this and he is going to be able to get confidence. Thank you.
Closing Bell is weekdays at 3 p.m. Transferring to Maria Bartiromo. We'll be right back.